The prestigious gastro-elite competition buzzed with activity as culinary prodigies from across the country arranged their expensive equipment at gleaming stainless steel cooking stations in a sea of crisp white chef jackets adorned with prestigious culinary school emblems. Sarah Miller stood out like a dandelion in a rose garden. Her modest attire jeans, a faded floral blouse, and a simple blue apron with small embroidered wheat stalks drew sideways glances from the other contestants. At 53, Sarah was at least 2 decades older than most competitors. Her equipment consisted of a well-worn knife roll containing her grandmother's carbon steel chef's knife, a few essential tools, and a small wooden box of family spice blends, no immersion circulators, liquid nitrogen, or modernist gadgetry in sight. The Gastro Elite competition had opened its doors to amateur entrants for the first time in its 15-year history, but everyone understood this was merely a publicity stunt. Real contenders graduated from schools like Le Cordon Bleu or had apprenticed under celebrity chefs. The amateur category was an afterthought, a bone thrown to cooking enthusiasts who would generate social media buzz before being eliminated in early rounds. Chef Roland Pierce, the competition's head judge and owner of 3 Michelin-starred restaurants, surveyed the contestants from his elevated platform. His gaze lingered briefly on Sarah before he whispered something to Sophia Winters, the fashionable food influencer and junior judge, who giggled in response. "Welcome to the 10th annual Gastro Elite competition," Roland announced, his British accent crisp over the speakers. "This year, we're thrilled to welcome both professional chefs and talented amateurs competing for the grand prize, a feature in Gourmet Quarterly and an apprenticeship at my flagship restaurant, Piermont." He paused for dramatic effect, scanning the room. "Your first challenge begins now. The theme is, elevated comfort food transform a humble dish into something worthy of a Michelin star. You have 90 minutes. Begin." The kitchen erupted into activity. Contestants rushed to the pantry, elbowing for prime ingredients. Sarah waited patiently until the initial frenzy subsided before making her selections. "What do you think she's doing?" a young chef with a sleeve of tattoos asked his station neighbor, nodding toward Sarah. "Probably making Grandma's secret casserole," his friend replied, triggering snickers across several stations. As Sarah returned with her modest selection of ingredients, the contestant beside her, Jackson Reed, rising star and social media darling from San Francisco's hottest new restaurant, glanced dismissively at her items. "Cornmeal? Buttermilk? Interesting choice for a high-end competition," he remarked, loud enough for nearby competitors to hear. "This isn't a country fair, you know." Sarah met his gaze with quiet dignity. "Comfort is defined by what comforts you, not by what others think should comfort you." The cameras circulating throughout the competition gravitated toward contestants, creating elaborate presentations, towering constructions, modernist foams, and artistic plate designs. Meanwhile, Sarah worked with methodical precision, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she prepared a dish that seemed incongruously simple compared to the gastro-theatrical performances around her. "Our amateur contestant seems to be preparing." "Grits?" narrated the competition host with barely concealed amusement as he approached Sarah's station. "That's a bold choice for a high-stakes culinary competition." Sarah didn't look up from her careful preparation. "It's stone-ground grits," she corrected gently. "My grandmother milled them herself from corn grown on our family farm in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She made them whenever we needed strength or comfort." "And how do you plan to elevate such a basic dish?" the host pressed, exchanging knowing glances with the camera operator. "By making it properly," Sarah replied simply, continuing to slice heritage tomatoes with precision that would have impressed any trained chef. Had any been paying attention? Throughout the competition floor, sous vide machines hummed. Anti-griddles froze innovative sauces, and smoke from molecular gastronomy techniques wafted dramatically skyward. By contrast, Sarah's station featured a single cast-iron skillet, simmering gently. 30 minutes remaining, announced Roland Pierce, strolling between stations with critical eyes. When he reached Sarah's station, he paused, frowning at the apparent simplicity of her preparation. "Grits?" he questioned, his tone making clear his assessment: stone-ground heirloom corn grits with slow-roasted tomato confit, crispy heritage pork belly, and foraged ramp oil, Sarah elaborated. Not looking up from her careful preparation of garnishes, Roland's eyebrow arched. "Rather pedestrian, isn't it? This competition rewards innovation and technical excellence. Sometimes the most difficult challenge is perfecting simplicity," Sarah responded, her voice steady despite the flush creeping up her neck. "My grandmother spent 50 years perfecting this dish." "Well," Roland replied with a tight smile, "this isn't your grandmother's kitchen, is it? This is a professional competition." He moved on before Sarah could respond, lingering twice as long at Jackson's station, where he was preparing a deconstructed beef Wellington with truffle foam and compressed vegetables. As the final minutes ticked down, Sarah arranged her dish with the same care the other chefs devoted to their elaborate presentations. Her grits gleamed in a simple earthenware bowl, adorned with precise arrangements of garnishes that created a subtle pattern of colors and textures. "Time's up. Hands off your plates," Roland announced. The judging began with the professional category. Each elaborate creation received lavish praise for its technical complexity and innovative approach. When Jackson presented his deconstructed Wellington, featuring 5 different preparations of beef and a sauce that had required 3 different modernist techniques, the judges practically swooned. "This is exactly the kind of boundary-pushing cuisine we're looking for," Roland declared. "The technique is impeccable, and you've truly elevated a classic." After the professionals finished, the amateur category began their presentations. Each home cook brought forward dishes that attempted to mimic the professionals' complexity, with varying degrees of success. Most received polite but lukewarm responses from the judges. When Sarah's turn came, the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. She placed her earthenware bowl before the judges with the same dignity she might have used to serve honored guests in her home. "This is stone-ground heirloom corn grits with slow-roasted tomato confit, crispy heritage pork belly, pickled ramps, and foraged herb oil," she explained. "The grits come from a corn variety my family has grown for 6 generations. They're cooked slowly with spring water and finished with cultured butter I churned yesterday." Roland stared at the bowl as if Sarah had placed a fast food burger before him. "This is it? This is your elevated comfort food?" "Yes," Sarah replied simply. "Where's the elevation?" Sophia asked, not bothering to hide her disappointment. "Where's the transformation you've just made?" "Breakfast. The elevation is in the technique and balance," Sarah explained. "Each element requires precision. The grits must be creamy but maintain texture. The pork rendered to perfect crispness but not greasy. The acidity of the pickled ramps balancing the richness." Roland sighed dramatically. "Very well. Let's taste this." Traditional preparation. He took a small, reluctant spoonful, clearly expecting little but. As the spoon entered his mouth, something unexpected flickered across his face of surprise. Quickly masked by professional composure, he took another spoonful, this time deliberately, including all elements of the dish. Sophia, following his lead, did the same. Her practiced camera-ready expression faltered. The third judge, Executive Chef Daniel Alvarez, known for his technical precision, took his time with the dish, methodically trying different combinations of components. The grits have remarkable texture, Daniel noted. Breaking the uncomfortable silence, they carry flavor in a way I wouldn't have expected. The pork provides depth, Sophia acknowledged reluctantly, and the ramp oil cuts through the richness effectively. Roland placed his spoon down carefully. While the presentation lacks the refinement we expect at this level of competition, there is technical skill in the preparation. His admission seemed dragged from him unwillingly. You will advance to the next round, but I strongly recommend reconsidering your approach if you wish to progress further. After the first round, the competitors gathered in the waiting area. The professionals clustered together, rehashing the judges' comments and strategizing for the next challenge. Sarah sat alone, reviewing notes in a small elotus. Worn journal. How did you get the judges to advance you? The question came from Alyssa Chen, a young pastry chef whose elaborate plated dessert had been eliminated despite its visual splendor. I mean, you literally made grits. Before Sarah could answer, Jackson interrupted. Probably the diversity quota, he said. Just loud enough to be heard across several conversations. The producers need to keep the demographics interesting for television, or maybe they just wanted a good elimination story for next round. Another contestant added, the home cook who got lucky once and then crashed spectacularly. Sarah closed her journal, tucked it into her bag, and stood. The corn is hand-selected and stone-ground to maintain the germ, which gives it a nutty flavor you can't get commercially. The grits simmer for 2 hours at precisely 195 degrees. The pork is cured for 10 days before being rendered. The ramps are harvested during a 2-week window when they're at peak flavor. She looked around at the skeptical faces. There is no trick, only care. As she walked away, she heard Jackson mutter, care doesn't win culinary competitions. Innovation and technique do. The next morning, competitors arrived to find the kitchen transformed. The pantry had been replaced by farm stands overflowing with local produce, and heritage breed meat and poultry stations adorned one wall. Welcome to your second challenge, Roland announced. Today's theme is agricultural heritage. Create a dish that honors the farming traditions of American cuisine while demonstrating contemporary technical mastery. You have 2 hours. Begin. Once again, the professional chefs rushed for the prime ingredients, while Sarah waited patiently. When she finally approached the produce, she selected items that others had overlooked. Gnarly root vegetables, tough-looking greens, and an aged chicken that the professional chefs had dismissed in favor of more prestigious proteins. Is she serious? Jackson whispered to another contestant, watching Sarah collect chicken feet and necks along with her whole bird. She's making stock again? That's not even a dish. But Sarah worked with the same focused intensity, breaking down the chicken with startling efficiency. Her grandmother's knife, moving with precision that would have impressed any butcher. She reserved every part, setting up multiple preparations simultaneously. Our amateur contestant appears to be making chicken and dumplings, the host narrated uncertainly as he approached her station. Can you elaborate on your concept? I'm making a farmhouse chicken pot pie with handmade drop biscuits and root vegetables, Sarah explained. The chicken is air-dried while I prepare the other elements. Everything from this bird will be used, the feet and bones for stock, the liver for the gravy, the skin crisped for texture. The host seemed surprised by the technical complexity underlying the seemingly simple dish. That's quite involved. And how does this connect to agricultural heritage? Sarah's hands never stopped working as she answered. This honors the farming traditions I grew up with in the Appalachian Mountains. Using the whole animal shows respect for the farmer's work and the life that was taken. These cooking methods sustained families through harsh winters and scarce times. Nearby, Jackson was preparing a sophisticated take on American farm cuisine, compressed watermelon cubes with heritage corn prepared 5 ways, accompanied by molecularly spherified buttermilk and pork belly smoked in hay. His station was a whirlwind of modern equipment and technique. As the final minutes counted down, Sarah's dish came together with a precision that belied its rustic appearance. The pot pie glistened, its golden biscuit top surrounding a filling of perfectly cooked chicken and vibrant root vegetables. A careful arrangement of crispy chicken skin and foraged herbs completed the presentation. When judging began, the professional chefs once again received effusive praise for their innovative approaches. Jackson's complex presentation earned particular acclaim. This is agricultural heritage reimagined for the modern palate. Roland declared, the technical execution is flawless. When Sarah's turn came, she presented her dish with quiet confidence. This is a farmhouse chicken pot pie with drop biscuits made from heritage wheat flour, featuring free-range chicken and heirloom vegetables. The gravy incorporates chicken liver for depth, and the vegetables are individually cooked to highlight their unique characteristics. Roland examined the dish with evident skepticism. Once again, you've chosen a remarkably traditional preparation. Where is the contemporary technical mastery this challenge requires? In the harmony of techniques, Sarah replied. The chicken is brined, air-dried, and precisely cooked to maintain moisture. The biscuits use a lamination technique, usually reserved for pastry. The vegetables are individually blanched, shocked, and finished to ensure perfect texture. Roland's first bite was tentative. His second was more deliberate. By the third, the other judges were watching him closely. The chicken is perfectly cooked, he admitted. The texture is remarkable. The depth of flavor in the gravy is extraordinary, Sophia added, surprise evident in her voice. It tastes like it's been reducing for days, not hours. Daniel, the technical judge, studied the biscuit with professional interest. The lamination in these biscuits is masterful. They have impressive lightness while maintaining structure. He looked up at Sarah. These are genuinely hand-laminated, not machine-rolled? Sarah nodded. My grandmother taught me when I was 12. It took me 3 years to do it properly. Well, Roland said finally, clearing his throat, while I continue to find your presentation lacking in contemporary refinement, I cannot deny the technical execution. He seemed almost annoyed by this admission. You will advance to the semifinals. The announcement sent ripples of disbelief through the professional contestants. Never in the competition's history had an amateur advanced beyond the second round, let alone to the semifinals. In the waiting area afterward, Sarah found herself approached by Daniel, the technical judge. While others were distracted by interviews, your knife skills are not those of an amateur, he observed quietly. Neither is your understanding of flavor, balance, or protein cookery. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I've cooked every day for 40 years, she replied simply, first beside my grandmother in our farmhouse kitchen, then in our family diner, and finally for harvest crews and community gatherings. Daniel's eyebrows rose. You owned a restaurant? That would make you ineligible for the amateur category. I did not say I owned a restaurant, Sarah corrected gently. My parents opened a small diner in our town after the coal mines closed. I worked there from age 13 until it closed when I was 38. Since then, I've only cooked for family and community gatherings. That's 15 years of professional cooking experience. Danielle noted. Working as a family in a family business is not the same as being a professional chef. Sara replied, I never trained formally. I never held the title of chef. I simply cooked the food my grandmother taught me. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Your grandmother taught you very well, he said finally. Yes, Sara agreed, a hint of sadness crossing her features. She did. The next morning brought new tension to the competition. Only 8 contestants remained, 5 professionals and 3 amateurs. With Sara, the only amateur who hadn't attended culinary school, welcome to your semi-final challenge. Roland announced, today's theme is signature style. Create a dish that definitively represents who you are as a culinary artist. Show us your gastronomic identity. You have 3 hours. Begin. Jackson immediately began assembling an array of modernist tools. Time to separate the actual chefs from the home cooks. He announced loudly, no amount of authentic family cooking can compete with actual technique. Sara ignored the provocation, moving with methodical purpose through the pantry, selecting ingredients with careful deliberation. This time, she collected items that raised eyebrows among the other contestants: beef bones, oxtail, flour, and an assortment of herbs unfamiliar to many chefs who relied on imported ingredients. Is she making stew again? One contestant whispered. Probably the only thing she knows how to make. Another replied with a smirk. But as Sara's preparation progressed, the complexity of her process became evident. She carefully roasted bones before submerging them in simmering water. She prepared her dough with meticulous attention, working it with practiced hands. She created a bouquet garni with such precision that several professional chefs paused to watch. The host approached, genuinely curious this time. You appear to be making beef stew and dumplings, he observed. That's a rather humble dish for this stage of the competition. Sara looked up from her careful arrangement of herbs. This is my family's beef and herb dumplings recipe dish that sustained Appalachian families through harsh winters and harder times. It traveled with my ancestors from the hills of Scotland to the mountains of West Virginia, adapting to available ingredients while maintaining its essence. Like my family. Like me. She paused. If that isn't signature style, I don't know what is. The host, unexpectedly moved by her answer, nodded respectfully before moving on. Hours later, as judging began, the professional chefs presented increasingly elaborate creations. Jackson's offering featured smoked ice cream, alongside compression-tenderized wagyu and 3 different molecular garnishes, all plated with architectural precision. This represents my philosophy of breaking traditional boundaries, he explained. Each element challenges the diner's expectations of temperature, texture, and flavor. The judges praised his technical mastery and creative vision. As the last professional finished, there was a palpable sense that the bar had been set impossibly high for the remaining amateurs. When Sara's turn came, she carried forward a single earthenware bowl of steaming stew with perfectly formed herb dumplings floating on top, accompanied by a slice of freshly baked sourdough bread. This is my family's beef and herb dumplings, a recipe that has evolved through 5 generations, she explained. The broth simmers for 6 hours with roasted bones and oxtail. The dumplings are made with rendered bone marrow and herbs. I grow myself. The bread is from a sourdough starter my grandmother began 60 years ago. Roland stared at the simple presentation with poorly concealed disappointment. Once again, you've presented a traditional dish with no evident innovation or personal interpretation. This challenge was about signature style, not cultural reproduction. With respect, Sarah replied, her voice quiet but firm. Innovation is not always visible on the surface. My signature is in the balance of the broth, slightly more thyme than my mother used, less rosemary than my grandmother preferred. The dumplings are lighter than tradition dictates because I incorporate whipped egg whites. Each herb is selected for both flavor and its medicinal properties, according to Appalachian folk traditions. Roland sighed theatrically. Very well. Let's taste this. Traditional preparation. As the judges leaned forward to sample the broth, the aromatic steam rose to meet them. Their first sips were followed by a moment of profound silence. The depth of this broth is remarkable, Daniel finally said. There are layers of flavor that continue to develop with each spoonful. The balance is extraordinary, Sophia added, her usual camera-ready persona momentarily forgotten. It's rich without being heavy, complex without being confusing. Roland's reaction was the most telling. He tasted, then tasted again, adding different combinations of components with each spoonful. Finally, he placed his spoon down with deliberate care. In my 30 years as a chef, he said slowly, I have had beef stew perhaps 200 times. In homes and restaurants across the world, I have never tasted one with this clarity of flavor or precision of execution. He seemed almost reluctant to continue. The refinement is in the technique, not the presentation. You will advance to the finals. The announcement sent shockwaves through the competition. An amateur home cook had advanced to the final round of the most prestigious culinary competition in the country. This is ridiculous. Jackson fumed in the waiting area after the results were announced. She's making grandmother food. How is that competing at the same level as our techniques? Did you taste her broth? Asked Alyssa, who had stayed to watch despite her elimination. It was like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like tasting beef in the most perfect way possible. So what? Jackson snapped. Anyone can make good-tasting food with enough salt and fat. This competition is supposed to be about pushing boundaries and demonstrating technical mastery, perhaps, said Daniel, who had overheard as he passed by. You should consider that there are different kinds of technical mastery. Achieving perfect balance in a clear broth requires as much precision as any modernist technique, perhaps more, as there's nowhere to hide imperfection. The following morning, only 3 contestants remained. Jackson, a professionally trained pastry chef named Elise, and Sarah. The kitchen had been reconfigured once more, with 3 cooking stations now positioned to face the judges directly. Welcome to the final challenge of the Gastro Elite competition, Roland announced. Today's theme is simply, excellence. Prepare a 3-course meal that represents the pinnacle of your culinary capability. You have 4 hours. Begin. As the finalists began their preparations, camera crews documented their contrasting approaches. Jackson's station became a laboratory of modern technique, with equipment humming and smoking as he prepared elaborate constructions. Elise worked with the precision of a chemist, measuring ingredients to the 10th of a gram for her intricate pastry components. Sarah's station, by contrast, featured traditional equipment used with remarkable efficiency. Her hands moved with practiced speed, breaking down ingredients and building complex preparations through classical methods rather than technological shortcuts. Our amateur finalist appears to be preparing a multi-component meal centered around traditional Appalachian ingredients. The host narrated, watching Sarah prepare a rabbit with impressive precision, can you walk us through your menu concept? My first course is a chilled corn and buttermilk soup with pickled ramps and smoked trout, Sarah explained, her hands never pausing their work. The main course is braised rabbit with root vegetables and black walnut dumplings. Dessert is a vinegar pie with bourbon-poached peaches and hand-churned buttermilk ice cream. That's quite ambitious for the time allowed, the host observed. Sarah nodded. Each dish represents a milestone in my culinary journey. The soup was the first dish my grandmother allowed me to prepare for our family diner. The rabbit was my father's favorite celebration meal. The pie is from my great-grandmother's recipe, the last thing she taught me before she passed. As the hours progressed, the tension in the kitchen mounted. Jackson encountered a serious setback when one of his molecular components failed to set properly, forcing a last-minute redesign of his first course. Elise worked with meticulous focus, her pastry training evident in the geometric precision of her components. Sarah moved with calm efficiency, managing multiple cooking processes simultaneously. When a small grease fire erupted at her station, she calmly smothered it and continued working without missing a beat. A response that spoke to years of experience in high-pressure cooking environments. 15 minutes remaining, Roland announced. Finalize your plating and preparations. In the final moments, the contrast between the contestants became even more pronounced. Jackson rushed to complete his elaborate architectural plating, sweat beading on his forehead as he carefully positioned microelements with tweezers. Elise applied final glazes to her desserts with a painter's precision. Sarah arranged her dishes with careful attention to both visual composition and practical dining considerations, ensuring every component was positioned to be enjoyed in perfect balance. Time's up, hands off your plates, Roland called. The judging began with Jackson's three-course modernist exploration, featuring sous vide proteins, vegetable foams, fruit caviar, and edible soil made from dehydrated mushrooms and breadcrumbs. This represents the cutting edge of culinary innovation, he explained confidently. Each course challenges preconceptions while delivering intense flavor through modern technique. The judges praised his creativity and technical skill, though Roland noted that his hastily revised first course lacked the cohesion of the other elements. Elise presented next, offering a meal that bridged classic French technique with contemporary Asian influences. Air dessert, a delicate construction of multiple chocolate textures with yuzu and black tea elements, drew particular praise. Finally, Sarah presented her three-course menu. Unlike the architectural constructions of her competitors, her dishes appeared deceptively simple, with garnishes arranged for optimal flavor rather than visual drama. This meal represents my journey from the mountains to the modern world, and from granddaughter to grandmother, she explained. Each dish carries both cultural significance and personal meaning. Roland approached the judging with visible skepticism, having made his preference for innovation clear throughout the competition. However, as he tasted each dish, his professional composure couldn't fully mask his reaction. The soup's bright clarity and textural contrast drew appreciative nods. The braised rabbit with its complex, aromatic sauce prompted a prolonged silence as he savored multiple bites. When he finally reached the vinegar pie, with its perfect balance of sweet and tangy notes, something unexpected happened. Roland Pierce, celebrity chef, Michelin-starred restaurateur, and notorious culinary hardliner, closed his eyes for a moment too long to be merely tasting. The technical execution is impeccable, he said finally, his voice slightly rougher than before. The pie crust has perfect flakiness, substantial yet delicate. The balance of sweet and acidic demonstrates remarkable restraint. Sophia, who had started the competition dismissive of Sarah's traditional approach, appeared genuinely moved. These dishes tell a story in a way I haven't experienced before, she admitted. There's history in every bite, Daniel, the technical judge, subjected each component to methodical analysis. The precision in your knife work is extraordinary, he noted. The rabbit is perfectly cooked tender, yet maintaining structural integrity. The emulsification in your sauce demonstrates classical technical mastery. As the judges conferred in private, the three finalists waited in tense silence. Jackson paced nervously, still confident in his technical superiority, but unsettled by the judges' reactions to Sarah's offering. Elise watched the judges' deliberations with professional calm, while Sarah stood quietly, her hands folded before her. When Roland returned to announce the winner, the usual dramatic pause seemed especially tense. Cooking at its highest level is about more than innovation or technical showmanship, he began. It requires understanding of flavor, mastery of technique, and something more ineffable, the ability to move the diner through taste and texture alone. He looked at each finalist in turn. Today, we witnessed three very different approaches to culinary excellence. All demonstrated remarkable skill. All would be worthy winners in any ordinary competition. The pause that followed stretched beyond theatrical into something genuine. The winner of this year's Gastro Elite competition, whose work demonstrated not only technical precision, but a depth of understanding that transcends trends and technology, is Sarah Miller. The announcement was met with a moment of stunned silence before the audience erupted in applause. Jackson's face registered disbelief, then anger, then as the judge's decision sank in a reluctant recognition. Elise stepped forward immediately to congratulate Sarah with professional grace. Sarah herself received the news with the same quiet dignity she had maintained throughout the competition. Only the slight trembling of her hands revealed her emotion. In my 35 years as a chef and 20 as a judge, Roland continued, I have rarely encountered cooking that so perfectly balances technical mastery with emotional resonance. Your pie alone would merit serious consideration at any Michelin evaluation. After the cameras stopped rolling and the audience dispersed, Roland approached Sarah privately. Your cooking? He began, then paused, searching for words. It reminded me of why I became a chef, not for acclaim or innovation, but because food, when prepared with such care, carries something essential, something human. Sarah nodded, understanding what he couldn't quite articulate. My grandmother used to say that the most important ingredient is memory. She replied, not just the memory of how to prepare a dish correctly, but the memory of who we're cooking for and why it matters. Roland pierced the culinary purist who had begun the competition, dismissing her. Grandmother Food extended his hand in genuine respect. I would be honored if you would consider taking the apprenticeship at Piermont, not to learn our techniques, but perhaps to teach us something of yours. 6 months later, a small addition to Roland Pierce's flagship restaurant became the most difficult reservation to secure in the city. A 6-seat chef's counter where Sarah Miller prepared Appalachian heritage cuisine with the technical precision of a master and the soul of a grandmother. No molecular gastronomy. No architectural plating, just perfect execution, flawless balance, and the invisible innovation of a lifetime's accumulated wisdom. Sarah's table, as the intimate space came to be known, transformed from curiosity to phenomenon when the Michelin Guide awarded it a star of its own separate from Piermont's existing 3-star unprecedented recognition for a restaurant within a restaurant. The citation praised Sarah's cooking as a masterclass in technical perfection disguised as simplicity and a profound reminder of food's capacity to transmit cultural heritage. The waiting list stretched to 6 months, with celebrated chefs and food critics from around the world jockeying for reservations. What most surprised the culinary establishment wasn't just Sarah's success, but how it rippled through the industry. Suddenly, technique's sake seemed hollow in comparison to cooking that carried genuine emotional and cultural weight. Jackson Reed, who had initially dismissed his loss as a fluke, underwent his own transformation after dining at Sarah's table. The experience left him visibly shaken. "I've been focusing on the wrong things," he confessed to a food journalist later. "I've been creating dishes that showcase technique rather than connecting with diners." His new restaurant, opening the following year, would feature what he called heritage-forward innovation, modern techniques applied with restraint to celebrate rather than reinvent traditional flavors. For Sarah, the recognition brought opportunities she had never imagined: cookbook offers, television appearances, invitations to lecture at culinary schools that would once have dismissed her lack of formal credentials. She accepted some, declined others, and insisted that her primary focus remained the 6 seats at her counter, where she continued to cook every service herself. When Gourmet Quarterly finally published their feature on Sarah, the second part of her competition prize, they titled it, "The Revolutionary Act of Cooking Like Your Grandmother." The article explored how Sarah's approach challenged fundamental assumptions about culinary evolution and excellence. In a world obsessed with novelty, the writer concluded, Sarah Miller reminds us that true innovation can mean perfecting what already exists rather than constantly reinventing it. Perhaps most meaningful for Sarah was the small ceremony held in her Appalachian hometown, where her family's diner had once stood. The mayor presented her with a key to the city and announced a culinary scholarship in her grandparents' names for children from rural communities. Standing before the gathered crowd, including former customers of her family's modest diner, Sarah spoke briefly about her journey. "My grandmother never wanted recognition," she said. "She only wanted to feed people food that reminded them of home while giving her family a future in changing times. I cook the way I do because she taught me that preparing food is an act of love and preserving flavors, technique, and memories that might otherwise be lost." In her small apartment that evening, Sarah placed her Michelin star certificate beside the faded photograph of her grandparents standing proudly in front of their farmhouse kitchen. The true measure of her achievement wasn't in the critics' praise or the impossible reservations, but in this continuity, this unbroken chain of care and technique passed from one generation to the next. Surviving economic hardship, cultural shifts, and the persistent pressure to abandon tradition in favor of trend. In this, Sarah had achieved something far more significant than winning a competition. She had proven that excellence doesn't always announce itself with spectacle and innovation. Sometimes it whispers through perfect technique and flavors that transport us home, wherever that might be. The mayor presented her with a key to the city and announced a culinary scholarship in her grandparents' names for children from rural communities. Local farmers who had struggled to survive the changing agricultural economy found new markets through Sarah's connections. Their heirloom varieties and heritage breeds now prized by urban chefs seeking authenticity and depth of flavor. Standing before the gathered crowd, including former customers of her family's modest diner, Sarah spoke briefly about her journey. "My grandmother never cooked for fame or recognition," she said. "She cooked because feeding people was her way of caring for them, of preserving our heritage through times of change, of creating moments of dignity and pleasure, even when life was hard." She paused, looking out at the faces of people who had known her since childhood. "I cook the way I do because she taught me that preparing food is an act of love and preserving flavors, technique, and memories that might otherwise be lost." One evening, after a particularly busy service at her chef's counter, Sarah returned to her small apartment and placed a new award, Heritage Preservation in American Cuisine, beside the faded photograph of her grandmother standing proudly in her farmhouse kitchen. The true measure of her achievement wasn't in the critics' praise or the impossible reservations, but in this continuity, this unbroken chain of care and technique passed from one generation to the next, surviving economic hardship, cultural shifts, and the persistent pressure to abandon tradition in favor of trend. In this, Sarah had achieved something far more significant than winning a competition. She had proven that excellence doesn't always announce itself with spectacle and innovation. Sometimes it whispers through perfect technique and flavors that transport us home, wherever that might be. The most unexpected outcome of her success was how it changed the conversation about value in the culinary world. Critics began examining their own biases, questioning why certain cuisines were considered worthy of high prices and others were expected to be inexpensive. Chefs reconsidered their own definitions of skill and innovation, and diners, perhaps most importantly, started asking different questions about the food on their plates, not just how innovative is this, but how deeply satisfying, how connected to human experience, how respectful of ingredients and traditions. These questions represented a fundamental shift in culinary culture, recognition that true gastronomy encompasses not just technique and creativity, but also history, sustainability, and the profound connection between food and memory. It was a shift that Sarah had never set out to create. She had simply entered a competition with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that doing something well deeply, genuinely well is its own form of excellence. And perhaps that was the most revolutionary act of all.